Hey folks, today we've got a match in the M41, the walker-bulldog. It's a pretty sad tale, and a cautionary tale at that, in why you have to be really careful when you're playing a light tank. And it shows why I have a lot of trouble adapting to the light tank playstyle. The enemy Löwe, Tan Tank God, says that at the beginning of every single battle I've ever seen them play. They have over 12,000 battles, so I'll just let that speak for itself. The enemy have a good E75 driver and a decent pattern. Other than that, our team is more consistently passable. I'm not going to say good because they aren't. I do the same thing I normally would do with my mediums, which is bust this wall down and put myself in this bush just to get quick spots on whatever crosses the field. I know that something surely will cross it. Sure enough, the T-44 comes up, but he doesn't actually move all the way across. He's hiding back in those rocks, which is pretty unusual. Normally a medium driver will head straight for the buildings. Sitting back there is very risky. And interestingly enough, he figures out where he was shot from without ever actually spotting me. Although the knocked over piece of wall was probably a good indicator. I should have vacated that position a lot earlier. I would have saved myself 270 hit points, which would have potentially saved me and the game later on in the match. The enemy T-28 is up. He's looking away a bit, although his hull is very hard for me to pen, particularly at that angle. His turret is very weakly armoured on the sides, and so that's where I was able to put a shot through. There's no point sitting out in front of his gun if he knows where I am, so I shift around, make sure I'm behind some buildings and behind some bushes, and begin looking for more shots across at the T-44 or at anything else that's moved up to the T-44's position. Tiger 2 has actually started pushing the field. Unfortunately, he has Puppy Sixth Sense, which tells him not only that he's spotted, but that something's about to fire at him, so he manages to back out of my shot before I even fire it. This is a very annoying habit puppies have, which I seem to lack. I will quite happily sit there without realizing I'm about to be shot at and get hit, whereas puppies will back out of shots when they don't even know they're spotted. So Tan Tank God is such a tank god that he's already lost all his hit points and been finished off by a light tank. Pro. Enemy pattern pushes in. Actually, they've made a very, very aggressive push down the Crescent Road. This is quite uncommon. That Crescent Road usually ends up being a lot more of a stalemate. The reason they've done that is because we still have a pretty stupid number of tanks in base. Our T-69 and ISU have not in fact left spawn. In fact, the T-69 I'm pretty certain was AFK for nearly the entire match, which really didn't help considering he was the best player by stats on our team after me. So yeah, typically you won't see a heavy push down the Crescent Road unless it's something like, you know, a platoon led by me, in which case I'm very aggressive and will generally push that road. And enemy puppies very rarely do. Not much I can do about it at the moment. I did get some shots into the sides of the enemy as they pushed down it, but I really need to try and save this hopeless IS-8, who is overextended, or more accurately suicided, into 3 tanks. Able to get the T-28 down, but the Tiger 2's not going to be quite so easy. He's giving me bad angles, and although I'm able to close the distance and get better angles on him, the IS-8 stupidly pushes out of cover and gets killed. Now, I can handle a Tiger 2 and Bulldog, just not with this few hit points. I drastically underestimated the amount of damage he could do to me, and so he finishes me off. He has the short 105, it doesn't matter, he has enough pen and enough damage to kill me in one. So, had I not taken that hit from the T-44 early on, I would have survived that, I would have finished off the Tiger too, and I'd now actually be in a very, very strong position. I'd be able to work my way around the back and finish off the enemy arty, maybe roll up behind the Waffenträger and finish him off too. If we look at the enemy's hit points, most of them are quite low. Now at this point our T-69 has finally woken up. He's actually managed to kill 2 tanks in the short time he's been participating actively in this match. Our T-92 drives out down the central Crescent Road and shotguns somebody, but then gets hit for it. I'm not sure what he hoped to achieve by that. Meanwhile, our T-69 finally gets taken out by the AMX 5100, who has more shells than he does. Now, why our team's so spread out, I honestly do not know. In that situation, if they collapsed back into a group, they would have had a really good fighting chance here. Brings me to our ISU. Now, he ended up copping most of the blame from me for this, partly because he was the most obvious problem with our team. If it's this late in the game and you've never left the bushes behind your spawn, you really do deserve to get blamed for the majority of what goes wrong. But he wasn't the only problem on our team. Indeed, if you look at the post-game report, you will see that there were a lot of problems on our team. Pretty much everybody except me. However, the ISU, having a very big gun but no armor, no hit points, and certainly no view range, should not be sitting as far back as possible behind a very thick bush. He's actually behind a double bush. Now, this would be brilliant if he had someone to spot for him, because it would mean he could fire his gun without being lit up. Actually, he may even be behind 3 bushes there, or certainly the equivalent of 3 bushes. It would be brilliant in that situation, but he has nobody spot for him, so he is blinding himself. In fact, as you can see, the enemy know where he is and are trying to flush him out with artillery. He can't see a goddamn thing. It's not until he reverses backwards that he spots the AMX 5100 about 200 meters away on his flank. He is able to finish the 5100, but another arty shell nearly finishes him, and honestly, he's lucky he was able to finish the AMX before it got him. Now, in this situation, he makes a shitty shot at the E75 and fails to pen it. It's inevitable he's going to die. Sure enough, the Waffenträger finishes him off. Had he not been hiding behind that bush in the back, had he actually been in a slightly forward position where he could spot, had he moved somewhere, he could have actively gone after the 5100, blapped it in the face, and then worked his way through the town. He would have had a better chance even, not least because the arty would have had trouble hitting him. But, you know, had he played that more aggressively, and certainly less passively, had he positioned himself somewhere he could see, he would have had a good chance of pulling out a miracle carry there, because if I remind you, the enemy tanks were all quite low health, and indeed by the time that 5100 was lit, I should have showed it, but there was only 1 tank on the enemy team who may have been unable to finish in 1 shot. If he had minimum rolled, he wouldn't have killed the IS-3 in 1 shot. However, the E75, the Waffenträger E100, the AMX, and obviously the arty, he physically could not have failed to 1 shot as long as he could hit them and pen them. And in fact, if he had been closer to them, he would have had a lot less trouble hitting them and penning them, because the BL-10, of course, is not particularly known for its accuracy. In fact, rather the opposite. So, what do we take away from this? In an end-of-game situation where it's you against, let's not say overwhelming odds, but let's say very poor odds, the last thing you want to do is turtle up in a corner and try and play hide and seek with the enemy, or rather just hide from the enemy. As the saying has gone for many years now, turtles never work. That came about for a reason. Turtles, in fact, never do work, and the only times they appear to are because the attacking team was just so blitheringly incompetent that they couldn't break it. If you are in a situation where it's on you to carry a game alone, your absolute number one priority is not in fact camouflage, it is view range. And view range is something the ISU doesn't have to begin with, and certainly you can't afford to be hiding in a bush where you have none instead of just very little. This is also part of the reason that the meta on NA and on EU has tended more towards replacing vents as a third piece of equipment and as a component of the Holy Trinity with optics or binoculars, usually optics because they're more flexible. When you're at that late game point, you really need the view range. If you're the last tank alive, you have to spot for yourself and shoot for yourself. So the further away you can spot enemies before they light you, the better. And on a tank with, base camo value as good as the ISU's, well, the ISU has like pretty fair camo. It's not the best, but it's pretty fair for its size. View range is more important than more camouflage. You'll get by with what you have, you just need more view range. The other thing that's really an asset to when you're fighting in a much larger number of enemy tanks than you have, say, when you're alone or when there's only you and a couple of other people left. The other thing you have is surprise. Now, you have to be able to use surprise. You've probably seen it in some of my videos, you've seen it in replays I put up by other goons, you've probably seen it basically anytime you've seen a decent player, like somebody who's actually self-aware and realizes what game they're playing and what tank they're driving. They'll typically not just drive in through somewhere they were already spotted, they will go away and come back somewhere else, or they'll try and play with the enemy and get them to be looking the wrong way when they come around. When you're the last tank alive, it's absolutely critical to do this. Obviously you can't do that when you're hiding behind a bush completely stationary all game, and it also happens to be the most blatant TD camping spot on the entire map. In fact, I would not be surprised if that first arty hit wasn't a blind shot, because if I was the enemy arty, that bush would be the first place I would aim for. Our ISU failed to do any of that, and as a result, what was a possibly winnable game fell through. Now, honestly, looking at the way he played, I doubt he would have been able to pull out a win anyway, even if he played everything else as I would have. But at least he would have got maybe a couple more damaging shots in, and it would have been a lot closer to a win. For my own part, there's certainly some blame to be doled out as well. I was playing a very fast, very highly maneuverable tank with decent base camouflage and a very good flexible gun. I should not have got myself killed. I overestimated my team's capacity to not fuck up and throw the game. I underestimated the ability of that target to kill me, and as a result I threw away a perfectly good light tank to try and kill a tier 8, a not even fully upgraded tier 8 at that. And he ended up dying shortly afterwards anyway to somebody else, so that was, a very bad misjudgment on my part, and this is a large part of the reason I don't do well in light tanks, is because my very aggressive playstyle tends to lead to me overcommitting myself, which I can get away with in a tier 10 medium, and I can get away with in a tier 10 heavy. I can't get away with it in a light tank of any tier. It doesn't happen. In light tanks, if you commit to a fight, you can't win. Unless you get very lucky, you're not going to survive it. Whereas at least mediums have a little bit of staying power. They can tank a few hits and run away. A light tank, particularly at this tier, you're lucky if you can survive 2 or 3 hits. From even lower tier tanks, from same tier tanks, you're lucky if you can survive 1. And so as a result, I tend to do very poorly in my light tanks, particularly when I'm trying to play them in a fighting role rather than a spotting role, which I obviously do on this map. There's very limited capabilities for just pure spotting on Ruinberg. A lot of the time you end up having to be a fighting unit as well, which is not a bad thing because you can really play around in the buildings in the town, but you can be left quite badly exposed, particularly when you don't have enough people go through that town on the hill, which happens a lot these days. But at the end of the day, I'll say this in my defense, there's only so much blame you can apportion to a light tank who ends up out-damaging the vast majority of his team. And I think, as I said before, as much as the ISU was the obvious problem, I think that's the real issue that our team had. Just they failed to put out any damage anywhere, and that's typically what loses you a match. You know, some matches you can't really explain. You look at the damage panels and it looks like your team's actually been putting out hits, and yet somehow they lost control of the map and they lost the game. You can't really explain it, or, you know, it takes a while to figure out. But there are just a lot of those games where you look at the post-game battle report and you instantly know why you lost, just because you see a whole panel of 0 damage or 200, 300 damage apiece. Tanks not even doing half of their own hit points, essentially. Anyway, this is a good example of how not to play rather than how to play. So what you saw me do this match, don't do it. The actual early part, yeah, I threw away those 270 hit points to the T-44. That was a mistake, certainly. But poking around in the houses up there and putting out damage rather than passive scouting or rather than running away and hiding, I was going all right for a while there. There was obviously that one point where I was sitting out a bit too far on the road while I was shooting down the axial road and got hit in the side. That was a mistake. That was, again, avoidable damage that I really could have done a lot more with those hit points. Sorry, I'm mangling my sentences here a bit, but you know what I mean. I could have really used those 311 hit points later in the game. If I'd avoided either of those 2 shots, let alone both of them, I would have been in a really strong position to carry this. But hindsight's perfect. Unfortunately, a lot of the time I tend to get tunnel visioned on my little engagement on my corner of the map, and I fail to notice how the rest of my team's going. You've seen it moderately recently in one of my Object 430 videos, the one on Sand River, where I was too busy fighting Don Quixote in a rather tense situation to notice the rest of my team had melted, and our T-95 was running away from the cap, trying to avoid being hit instead of getting resets. So situational awareness, I think, is something I really need to work on if I'm going to improve any more of this game. I think at the moment, short of getting a better internet connection or moving to another country where I'm closer to the server, there's very, very little I'm going to be capable of doing towards improving my response time, improving my accuracy, things like that. My mechanical playability, let's call it, is about as good as it's going to get for the foreseeable future. In fact, it's probably going to get worse because I'm having internet issues at the moment, and until I can get a second connection put in here and just be on my own connection, not have to worry about other people using it while I'm trying to play, it doesn't look like that's improving. And as a side note, my constant complaining about the connection getting worse after 9.0, having done a little bit of thinking about that, I'm actually thinking it may be one of my housemates, or one or more, might not realize that if they leave a torrent client open 24 hours a day, it will seed stuff constantly. But I'm not sure. It may be wargaming, it may not be. It's very difficult to tell sometimes. Australian infrastructure is so shitty to begin with, it's difficult to establish what baseline shittiness is, basically. But actually, in about 2 weeks from date of recording, so probably by the time this video is up, I will have moved downstairs into my own flat, as opposed to a bedroom in like a shared living area. So at least I'll have my own little space, and then I'm going to be paying a bit more for rent, but once I get some more money saved up, I will be looking to drop my own connection in, so I'll be able to basically play whenever I want and not have to worry about my connection being fucked with. So there's that. I don't think I'll be able to stream still until probably not even if the NBN gets put through here. For those not in Australia, the NBN is a fibre optic network being rolled out across the country. It was the previous government's attempt to bring this country out of the fucking Stone Age. Whether it would have accomplished that goal or not before the coalition fucked with it, I'm not sure, but it would have at least been an improvement. So that's being rolled out across the country. It's still not in my area. It's basically bracketed either side of me. The central part of Newcastle, like the CBD and the sort of areas around Hamilton, the junction and all of that, They all have it. The new housing estates around the North Lakes and out the west side, like probably a couple kilometers out northwest of me, they all have it. But my area is just outside of the most recent batch of rollouts, which is, I think, going out through Mayfield. So any of you who are familiar with Newcastle's geography probably now realise where I live. But hopefully they'll roll it out pretty soon. I have seen them tearing up the road and laying cables, so I'm hoping that was what it was for and not just something else. If that comes up anytime soon, I may actually be able to start streaming. If I can, obviously I'll announce as much and you'll be able to come watch me be shit at this game in real time. Failing that, I'll hopefully be able to save up enough money to move back home, and by back home of course I mean back to Canada, or over to Europe somewhere, basically to a civilized country. We'll see how we go. It's getting a bit into the long-term plans there. But as I said before I got very, very badly on a tangent, my mechanical skills at this game I think are about as good as they're going to get. My reaction times certainly aren't improving, let's be honest. I'm not exactly a kid anymore. I don't have the most rapid reaction times. I never did to begin with. I've always been a fan of slower paced games. So as far as actually being able to drive the tanks and shoot the tanks go, I won't be getting any better. The real area of improvement is going to be seeing what my team is doing and realizing in time to save the game. Sometimes I can do it, sometimes I can't. If you watch the players who are actually consistently better than me, they're a lot better at that than I am. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And as ever, I wish you the best of luck, and I'll see you next time.